Oh, okay.
So I'm the problem, you're saying? I'm the problem?
Yes, you are.
Me? I'm the problem? This guy thinks I'm the problem? He's been an idiot. This guy's always been an idiot. I'm so. Oh, hi. Sorry. How you doing? Hello, Hockey World. I just want to throw that out there. One of my favorite quotes of the year so far. Hats off to Phil Kessel. I know I wasn't here yesterday. Thank you guys so much for.
Don't get me started, Act, please.
Oh, we won't go. We won't go there. I just wanted to throw it out there for a second.
Please, come on.
I really appreciate you guys filling in yesterday. My son was getting some tests done, and hopefully we're on the road to recovery. So that's all I'm going to say for now. But and then last night, in a race to finish my hockey rink before the sub-zero temperatures hit the area, which was impossible. I worked for about 7 hours till about 2 in the morning. Finished my rink, filled it with water. Frozen solid, of course, because it was 4 degrees and I did it. So in the middle of the night when I'm doing it, I whack my nose. I don't know if you can tell, my nose is uglier than normal, but I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me get rid of that. Sorry, but yeah, there's
it's just as ugly as it always does.
Yeah, it's just uglier than normal. But
who has the coldest weather right now?
We have. I mean, it's 12 out. It's pretty good.
You got me beat by 2 degrees.
Negative 22 outside right now.
We're at 0 in Michigan. So.
There you go.
Okay, the winner. If Ryan calls in, I'm sure Alberta will have the coldest.
It was 0. My ice would freeze like that. So after a month working on this thing by myself as my Noah's Ark, it's done, and I'm still fine tuning little things, but I will eventually show some really cool video pictures of it. It's really very, very awesome. It's like the rink you always wanted to build as a kid but never could. And it really feels to me like this is just it's so much fun to build it. And last night was not fun. It was frantic, and because it was getting cold, and I was like, it was a long, stressful day, and then I was out there, and laying the tarp out to fill it with water. At like 2 in the morning, wind whipping around. it was really, and then taking the hot water from, it was good. Filling it with hot water from the laundry so the hose wouldn't freeze. It was one of those type of nights. And then waking up this morning and just taking, the greatest thing about building a rink is taking a puck and putting it on the ice and sliding it across and just like, wow, that's awesome. That's just all worth it. So it's almost ready to go now for skating. But in the midst of it, I have these. So I hung the boards. I built a big deck, like a 20 by 40 wooden deck, and then in the corners I had, big poles, that were into the ground, deep into the ground, to make it stable. I don't want to kill anyone. So I had these things. So across the poles I had these big beams, like 2x4s, which I hung plywood on to make my boards, right? So it was like 1 in the morning last night. I'm exhausted. I walk onto the rink and just whack myself on one of these cross beams, just like right out of like Three Stooges, like boom, just clothesline myself right across my forehead and nose.
Sort of like how if Matt Cook had hit you.
Yes, and I just that weird feeling like I just seriously injured myself. Comes over you like I am really hurt. Blood coming out of my nose. Like this is not good. It's 1 in the morning. Last thing I'm going to do is wake up somebody and say, I got to go to the hospital. But it was not that bad. And quickly, everything froze because there was no sense in icing my face. Just staying outside was all I had to do. So I just stayed outside. And I'm like, but I'm not. I would not be stopped. I continue to build. Yeah, it's done. So I'll leave it there. And my daughter goes out this morning. She looks at it. She's like, yeah, it's in the ice isn't frozen enough. I'm like, screw you. It will be. It's staying under 20 all week, so we're in good shape. This is the perfect week to do it. We're in great shape. So anyway,
when's the first game scheduled?
Yeah, this weekend. We have a big bottle of champagne to break against it because it literally looks as big as a boat. so we want to play.
Watch it. You'll probably break the ice.
I think this weekend. Now I'm into the whole, taking, spraying hot water on it every couple of minutes just to kind of add another little layer, and that makes it more solid. I'm learning all my, Craig Patrick tricks or whatever. I have the whole thing going this weekend, and I found a way to lay lines too because I always wanted to have lines on it, but you can't lay lines on a tarp. If you've ever tried to paint a tarp or even like tape, my idea was duct tape. Get big red duct tape and do that. But that was moot because duct tape won't stick to tarp when it's 4 degrees. Duct tape does not stick to anything. So what I did was I taped. This morning I got some duct tape and I taped it to itself in 20-foot strips, and then went outside and laid it on top of the ice, and then sprayed it on top and froze it into the ice. So we'll see how long that works. But it looks kind of cool. The things we do. So anyway, just want to throw that out there. I appreciate everyone feigning interest. Let's start the show. Oh man. My other quick note on the Leafs, because before we get going, because I wanted to throw this because I don't want to talk about them too much today. Is this? Horacek comes out and says, the first thing he says, which is what every Leaf fan wants to hear. We're not going to change anything. That's perfect. I love when interim coaches come in and say, it's going to be the same. Don't expect big changes. Don't expect anything. So this is a topic I want to bring up today. But I will start the show now. It is the 8th of January.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yep, 2015.
So far, I'm 100%.
Not Friday.
Not Friday.
It's not
Friday.
Okay. Here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It's January 8th, Thursday, 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
Oh, it's me. I'm Josh Roman. I thought Gardner was on. Never mind.
Yeah, no, he's not. I'm Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com today, coming to you from very chilly Philadelphia here, and then of course but we decided that it's the coldest in Michigan, which is.
I need to report, in order to be totally accurate, that I just checked and we've gone up to 1 degree. So.
Oh man.
That makes us the coldest.
Get out the lawn chairs.
Break out the suntan oil.
Oh my gosh! All right, that's awesome. Yep, it's 15 here now, which is not which is cold for our area, but not cold for where you guys are all from. We talked a little bit. If you want to watch the pre-show, we talked a little bit about my feelings on the Maple Leafs. And we're gonna have when we have Ty Anderson on tomorrow. I'm going to definitely talk about Phil Kessel tomorrow with Ty because he had a really good tweet, which you actually sent to me, Josh, that I really liked. Defending Phil Kessel, so we'll get into that tomorrow. But
yeah, I think Ty and I will be going to war on that one because I have a completely different take on Phil Kessel and the media right now.
So make sure you make popcorn before tomorrow's show.
Yeah.
And
what was Ty's take?
Ty was good for Phil, kind of basically. He was like, this guy's been getting beat up by the media in Toronto for too long, and he was basically good for Phil. So he liked. I mean, he dealt with Ty too. So he dealt with Phil. So. Yeah, we'll see. Well, let's get into the news, and unfortunately, we got to start with the sad news of JP Parise passing. Josh, you knew JP best of all of us. Give us a couple thoughts.
Yes, JP, great man. Got to know him really well over the last 6 years. Got to know him and Zach really well. JP, just a really great guy to talk to, especially over beers. You had a lot of great stories and great storyteller. I'd have him on many shows when I worked at XM. Used to get him on with Phil Esposito, his good buddy from the 72 Canada team. Also brought in JP for a few autograph signings here in Toronto. We did a huge event for the 40th anniversary of the 72 team here in Toronto, and got to spend a couple days with JP, and he was a class act and a really good guy, and he's the kind of guy that would give you the shirt off his back. He was just total class, and big loss for the Parise family and also all of hockey. He wasn't a huge point producer in the NHL, but he was a hell of a hockey player, and he was one of those heart and soul guys that brought a lot of character to a team, and he brought a lot of character to that 72 team.
Yeah, he sure did. He sure did. And you know, a big statement on this whole thing is, you know, his tie to Minnesota, obviously, and that's how I kind of think of him as a. Although I do remember him as an Islander, but you know, the whole fact that Zach Parise wanted to go back to Minnesota. You know, this is a tight family, and the fact that Zach took off to be with his dad. It's very, very tight family. So I'm sure it's a tough day for all of them. So, and yeah, one of them. I never met him. I never got a chance to meet him, but definitely, everyone just talks so highly of him, and everyone was very sad when the news came out the last couple of days. But
it's interesting that his legacy will be split because he was obviously an exceptional hockey player. When the NHL decided the Canadians to take on the Soviets, it was we're going to put the best team together, and JP Parise made that team. Now, he was not a star on that team; he was a role player on that team. But to even make that team says a lot about the respect that he garnered around the league. So, we split that off, and now the second element of his career, at least from my chair, was the fact that he was associated with the great program at Shattuck St. Mary's, and a lot of top players came through that high school program, and what you always heard about that program was how well organized, how classy, and it was a program that had its priorities together. Hockey was an important aspect of why people went there, but I think parents sent their kids there because they knew Parise was going to make sure that there was the proper separation between hockey and the academics. Pretty much everybody came through there had stories of having gone to tournaments and getting in late because of issues with the weather, and still being told, even though the bus rolled in at 2 or 3 in the morning, you're going to be at school the next morning at 8 a.m. That that's just the way it is. And everybody that you talk to that knew him always brought up his association with Shattuck St. Mary's and his involvement there, and what he meant to for that program. And then I've obviously known Zach Parise, and if you buy into, and I do, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, you have to conclude that Parise, JP Parise's sort of athlete hyphen philosopher approach to life is kind of rubbed off on Zach, and you could just tell by the sadness around the NHL of the impact that he had on so many people.
He had he's a very underrated player throughout his career. I mean, we know that he made Team Canada, and I was just looking up the statistics of 72. He played 6 games of the 8 games in that Summit Series, and he led the both teams with 28 penalty minutes. He had 4 points in 6 games.
Yeah. But he went nuts in Game 8 of that series, if you remember.
Yeah, and he played on a line with Esposito. Yeah, he played on the line with Phil Esposito. But the thing was, if you look at his career, he just missed out on all these championships. He played with Boston in the mid-'60s before, as Bobby Orr entered the NHL, so he didn't get a chance to win championships with the Bruins. He was involved in the expansion draft, went to the Leafs the year after they won the Stanley Cup in '67. Played the majority of his career in Minnesota, who didn't get to the final until, I believe, '79, so he wasn't part of that. Then got traded to the Islanders, was part of that Islanders team that got to the semifinals in '75, but just missed out on the Cup final teams in the late '70s and the early '80s. So he was on the cusp of winning championships, but just missed out on a number of opportunities.
Oh, yeah.
I would say that it's true that he's underrated now, but I don't think he was underrated back then. Right. I'm old enough to remember when he played, and there was a high measure of respect for what he did for him back then. But I do agree that over time it's been lost. That I would think that even Canadians, if you asked them to write down the names of everybody that was on that '72 team, they might forget JP Parise, even though he had that famous explosive incident, where he kind of lost his cool there in that Canada Cup, but certainly at that time he was respected. That's why, as I said, just the fact he made the team. And I will say this though, and I've seen stories that also to this effect. It was a bit of a surprise that he made that team because there were a lot of good players, and like nobody said, oh, he didn't belong on that team, but there were others that could have gone ahead of him. Some thought.
Yeah, and a few players that ended up leaving after I think 2 or 3 games because they weren't going to be playing. I know that Gilbert Perreault and Richard Martin and a few other Canadian players left and went back to Canada because they knew that they weren't going to be playing in the lineup because guys like Parise had established themselves in the lineup and weren't going to be taken out. So.
Yeah, that's a real good point.
And it's kind of, it's kind of strange. I don't think strange is the right word, but let's not forget Ryan Suter lost his dad not even 4 months ago. I think it was September 10th.
Right.
Lost his dad, Bob Suter, who was also a big, he was big in the USA program. And Zach and Ryan are very tight, are good buddies, and that was the whole reason for them signing in Minnesota together. So I'm sure they'll be able to lean on each other through tough times.
What's more difficult? Ryan Suter lost his dad suddenly, no opportunity to say a final goodbye. Zach had time to spend with his dad. However, he saw his dad go downhill rather dramatically. I don't know.
I lost my dad kind of suddenly, but at the same time, not surprisingly. So it was just. So I don't know.
Yeah. And I lost my dad after a long illness. It's sort of 6 of one, half a dozen of another.
I think sudden is, I don't know. The long illnesses, I've been through that with other people, and that just seems harder. I don't know why. It just feels harder to me.
Well, Josh's point is the best one, that they do have each other, that it is probably good that Zach has Ryan, who's gone through this, at least not quite the same, but that they could at least talk about it. And it's interesting because they're both the stars of the Minnesota Wild. They're both the faces of the team, and it's really good to read the way that the Wild have just allowed Zach Parise to do whatever he needed to do. It's really the only thing you should do, but sometimes sports they lose sight of what's important, and in this case they didn't.
Right, and Toronto played Minnesota on Friday, so in listening to some of the commentary during the game, there has been a drop in, he's been playing his usual 28 to 30 minutes a night, Ryan Suter, but there's been a drop in his play a little bit this year, and it's understandable if you lose your dad. Things that happen off the ice do affect, you can affect your performance on the ice, and, Minnesota has not really played as well as people had expected, and this is a contributing factor, but it's understandable, and I think people, if anybody's criticizing Ryan Suter for his play this year, should keep that in check and be understanding of his struggles right now.
Yeah, no, and Minnesota is an interesting topic that we should definitely get into at some point. They're not playing as well as people expected them to because they started off like gangbusters, right? But at the same time, they're still not out of it. A lot of people are sort of like eulogizing the Minnesota Wild these days, and it's not. It's interesting. It really feels like people are just selling them off. Oh, the Wild, they're going to be down this year. They're not going to make it.
They're front and center over the last day or so because there was a video that was released that got out there yesterday with Mike Yeo. Making a
he went nuts.
He went ballistic on the team in practice about how they weren't doing things the right way, and Kevin and I were and Ryan were talking yesterday about coaches that might be potentially on the chopping block like Todd McClellan and Claude Julien. You have to add Mike Yeo to that list as well if the team doesn't turn it around because that's a very talented team. They signed a guy like Thomas Vanek in the offseason who hasn't played as well as could be expected, and they're expected to make the playoffs.
Right.
How many of us think though that could have been a calculated, premeditated, Herb Brooks style move of trying to fire up the team? I don't have any inside information on that, but I think that's certainly possible. He would not be the first coach that has used those tactics in order to get their team to play with a greater intensity. And that, the Minnesota situation is, to me, boils down to they need better goaltending.
Oh yeah,
When you look at the
problem
save
for them.
percentages on that team,
Yeah.
they don't measure up.
And that has been their issue really for the last several years now. And they are the Philadelphia Flyers of the West. They have no, their goaltending is just not there for them. And they've been in that spot. And yeah, I mean it continues. Now, what's interesting, if Yo would get fired, I talked to somebody yesterday who said that they believe that he would be in the running for the Maple Leafs job next year. That was a guy that they really liked internally. Out there. So
I'd be surprised at that, but
no, I heard it was very much a possibility. Now, the Predators have put two guys on IR today. James Neal and Nystrom both went on IR. Nystrom's a big player for them. He's been a really good player for them. Much more. Nystrom is still a name that I can't say without shivers going down my spine. But yes, he is he's been very good. The son of the Nystrom that I just grew up.
Yes, we know Ak.
Yeah,
All Philadelphia fans hate him.
Nystrom's a hard one for me to say. Gillis, Nystrom. Some of these guys, when they have kids that are in the league, Domi. Anyway, so yeah, but Neal going on IR is a big deal for this team, as is Nystrom. But the Preds are still skipping along. What did I say? And we were on this very show. I believe they were the best. They were becoming the best team in the NHL. Now they are close to being, if not having, the best record in the NHL. I still believe they are. It just comes from watching them, the way they practice and the way they were live. And it brings me to my next point, which is this. Now, this is a topic that I will get into further tomorrow on the Cranky Hockey Writers show. But because I had thought about this for you and Eric, Kevin. But why fire a coach? Okay, this is my question. Why fire a coach? And then when you do fire a coach in the middle of the year, why bring an interim coach in? Because to me, I really have a lot of issues with the way this whole thing. And when you look at it, I remember, Laviolette coming in when Hitchcock was fired in Philadelphia and immediately changed things. But and Laviolette was, not an interim coach. Obviously, they brought him in right away. Last year, up in Winnipeg, they bring in another coach, not an interim guy, a respected coach, right? Comes in, turns that team plays really well. Promoting an assistant, it worked in Philadelphia. Okay, Berube last year, but not working so well this year. But it did work last year. But for the most part, if I can think back and historically, and I'm going to do some more research for tomorrow's show with the Cranky Hockey Writers, it feels to me like the idea of fire a coach is to boost the team, is to get the team going. By bringing an assistant coach in who's already with the team, I just don't see, unless the head coach was just so hated, and Babish didn't have his friends. He had his enemies, but I'm such an idiot with that. Sorry. But you know what I'm saying. Carlisle had his enemies, right? So, I wonder. I really question the idea of bringing in an interim coach. Any thoughts, Kev?
Well, we'll talk about it more, I think, tomorrow. But I think change is always built in to even an interim coaching situation because that playing time allotment is the one thing that really alters how a team is playing. And even if you don't change the system, I don't think in all the years I've covered the league there's ever been a situation where the head coach and the assistant coach see things exactly the same.
Right.
And even though he may be playing the same system and they're going to try, he's going to like some players better than Carlisle did, and he's going to not like some as well as Carlisle did. And he is going to have his own idea on who should play with whom. So, and the other thing is players, and I always bring this up all the time, players are on their best behavior, regardless of who the new coach is, whether he's an assistant coach. And they're on their best behavior because they've got a clean slate and they're trying to re-win their playing time. It's like in the corporations where it's a very trendy thing right now that you have to reapply for your job.
Yeah.
And that's what players will be doing. So even though Horacek comes out and says, we're going to be doing a lot of the same, but the way he moves his chess pieces is going to be different. So, and there's always a boost out of that because The energy level is higher because everyone is trying to impress that coach. They're trying to get, players who weren't doing very well under the Carlisle regime see this as a great opportunity. Those who were doing well are worried about their jobs, so they pick it up. So, I think you do get a boost on the short term from any kind of, coaching change. So I think your point is well taken, because the interim tag also, it's like getting a substitute teacher, and we all know what happens in the classroom when you get a substitute teacher.
Right.
You don't follow the curriculum, you don't follow the game plan. Everybody's just in it trying to worry about today, as opposed to about next, what's going to happen.
Substitute teacher that's been hanging around too. It's like this. This is a teacher that's been in the room with you already. So that's the other thing about this. This is a guy. Because a lot of times the assistant coach plays sort of good cop, bad cop with coaches, right? So.
Yeah, and almost always the assistant coach is the good cop.
Right.
Well, as a former substitute teacher, I know that you've always had to follow the actual main teacher's lesson plans no matter what. But the funny thing with Toronto is if there was a boost in energy, you could have fooled me yesterday because they made the same mistakes. They played terribly in the first game with Peter Horachek. And, I mean, there was, and we've discovered this in the last 24 hours, that there were some contributing factors here. Apparently, Carlisle was going to be going under the knife for back surgery, even if he had been kept as coach. It had been scheduled for mid-January, and he was going to probably be out of commission for a month. So that might have been a contributing factor to them moving on from him now. I mean, I get the impression that it was, how you say when a goaltender lets in a few goals and it's not his fault that the team playing around him that he's being pulled as a mercy pull. Well,
Yeah.
this was a mercy fire. I really think it was, because they were going to fire Randy Carlisle at the end of the year, even if the team made the playoffs. That was the indication. And the whole reason for the interim tag act with Horachek is because they are going to go after, if not Babcock, if he's not available, they're going to go after coaches that might not be available right now. There are a few coaches like Peter DeBoer and Paul McLean that are available that they might consider if no other coaches come on the market. But if McClellan and if Hitchcock and if Julian get let go, I'm sure that they're going to be in the mix for Brendan Shanahan in the summer. And they weren't going to lock themselves in to a new coach with Dave Nonis being the general manager right now, because Dave Nonis might not be the general manager in the summer, and they don't want another ex-general manager hiring the next head coach like Brian Burke hired Randy Carlisle.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, Brendan Shanahan pretty well, Kev, better than we do for sure. And is he this methodical? I mean, it's incredibly methodical. He is.
Yes. Oh yeah. No, I mean that's what made him, good as his job as head of the the player safety department, because he is very fastidious in his approach. He takes his time. He's very concerned about precedent, what's happened before, what the impact is. We all know the butterfly effect is pretty dramatic in the NHL on pretty much everything you do. You need one move here and it has an impact. He's a guy that likes to study the situation. So I said beforehand that I thought he was going to look at this for a season before he did anything. He wanted to get to know the players, and there is a big difference too from me and you and Mike and Josh watching players and watching 7 games of each team per year or whatever, and a guy who studies the team and knows what's going on in the dressing room and everything else. And I think that's what he really wanted to do. And I think this really fits into his personality, and I think this is why they hired him. The one thing you heard about Shanahan when he made presentations to the GMs, and he also did them to the media, like when a lot of people criticize a lot of his decisions, but when you sat and listened to Shanahan explain why he did the things he did, you came away saying, he's real logical in his approach.
Right.
Real logical. I mean, he thinks it through. He doesn't make rash decisions. A lot of us, make decisions based on emotion, and he doesn't do that. He was an emotional player, but that's not how he's been post-playing career. He's been a guy that's been pretty methodical, was a good word that you used.
Yeah, I mean, it really feels like, it really feels extremely. I mean, obviously this market is amplified, but and I thought Brian Burke was pretty patient with this, and they were pretty patient with Burke. But this is even moving at a slower pace to me.
Well, I mean, it's ironic that you bring that up, Ack, because what the reports are is that Shanahan is consciously trying to be the anti-Brian Burke because, Brian Burke was patient in a number of instances, but his interaction with the media, his reaction to certain events, he was out there all the time, and Shanahan is basically just wanted to be pulled back, let Dave Nonis be the point man, let him be the general manager, let him make the press conferences and do the interviews, and he's going to sit back and evaluate where the franchise is at this point. And I think the calendar may have been moved up a little bit with the way that this team has played. The rest of this month they play 9 of the next 11 games on the road, including a West Coast road trip. And if things decompensate as they've continued to do over the last few weeks, and they start to fall out of the playoff race, then you could see players like Santorelli and Winnick and Cody Franzen be on the rent-a-player market, and maybe them try to start moving other players like Joffrey Lupul out before the deadline, before they really start to try to reorganize this franchise in the summer. I think there's going to be a lot of changes in Toronto.
Possibly. I mean, Santorelli has been really good for them. This is getting away from that for a second. So Johnny Gaudreau was Johnny rocked last night. I don't know if you saw the hit or not. This is and by the good old Pavel Datsyuk. This is the good old Pavel. I mean, he just absolutely leveled him. We've been talking about. I mean, this is impressive. Datsyuk is probably twice his age.
Welcome to the league, Rook.
What's interesting about that is there aren't many players that Pavel Datsyuk would outweigh. But
yeah.
but he had 20 pounds on Gaudreau.
He did have 20 pounds.
Maybe more,
This is all about how to throw a hit. I mean, this is like, if you see the way he braces his body and shifts his weight, and this whole thing this is as good as Pavel Datsyuk is at passing or seeing the ice. This is like the perfect hockey player hit. And Gaudreau, to his credit, just as we've seen before, doesn't seem to get hurt when he gets hit. He just bounces back right back up. Doesn't seem to bother him. And how young does he look in this picture, by the way, that they show here? It's really funny too. It's like, okay, there's Johnny for a second, but yeah. Anyway, that was something. I watched a little bit of that game last night. It was a good game. Calgary is definitely they're a fun team to watch. You can see that they're young. They make the young type mistakes that young teams make, and it's shocking that they actually are where they are in my mind. That they're definitely doing it.
Well, what their strength has been the third periods, and that was even evident. Even though they didn't pull it off last night, they really are a confident team in the third period. They've come from behind a half a dozen times, I think, in the third period, and I think they lead the NHL in third period goals or goal differential. I think.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
They've really been good in that third period, and I think that Hartley's done a really nice job, getting the most out of that team, which is somewhat ironic because one of the things he's been really good at is bringing the youngsters along, which, if we all remember, was not his strength when he was in, Colorado. I mean, there was always great tension in the dressing room because he was so tough on the younger players. There were, I remember hearing the stories of Patrick Waugh standing up, defending the, some of the younger players. But you never know how much of that is calculated. I was sort of amused at hearing the discussion on the emotional Brian Burke because, as Eck knows, and I know Eck knows him pretty well as well. But see, I would say that as emotional as Brian Burke appears to be, and he is full of bluster, there's no doubt about it. I think rarely, if at all, he ever said something that he hadn't given some thought to before he said it. Like, nothing really escapes out of his mouth unless he intends to, make a bold statement. Like, usually when he said the things he did, he intended to say them. He wanted the reaction that he got. He's a pretty
planned out emotion. It's a planned out emotion.
exactly. That's it. He's quite scheming, and he does things for impact. He doesn't really lose his cool as some fans seem to think he does. He's looking to get the scattergun effect. He wants to give you a blast, and he wants it to kind of go everywhere. So
I wasn't insinuating he's out of control. I mean, he's a very sharp, calculating guy. I mean, when even like yesterday, because he apparently a comment that he made to one of the Toronto insiders about all the stuff with Ron Wilson and Kessel. The comments that Ron Wilson made about Phil Kessel recently, that he plays for 2 weeks and then disappears for 2 weeks, and Brian Burke came out and said, well, Ron Wilson in the 3 years that he was in Toronto never said one thing bad about Phil Kessel, so I don't know what the hell he's talking about. So, I'm sure that Brian Burke thought about that for a long time before he said that to that guy.
The irony of this, of course, is that Brian Burke, said things about Phil Kessel to people while he was in Toronto.
Well, here's the real irony to that statement. Brian Burke and Ron Wilson are tremendous friends. I mean, they played together at Providence, and I've been with the two of them. And it's like, your high school buddies who have this sophomoric humor, who, are just constantly jabbing one another. You're ugly, no, you're uglier, that kind of stuff. That's Wilson and Burke. Like, they are really, really, close. Now, probably their working relationship altered, friendship. But, for him to say that, that was a clear message being sent.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Josh, what do you have?
I wanted to bring up the fact that tonight Roberto Luongo makes his long-anticipated return to in Vancouver tonight versus the Vancouver Canucks as a Florida Panther. Yesterday, I don't know if you guys saw, but Luongo said he'd still be in Vancouver if he started in the Heritage Classic last year. Oh. I wanted to get your thoughts on what you thought about that. It's kind of like opening up old wounds, but
it is kind of like
was telling the truth. Do you think that if he would have started that game, he'd still be a Canuck right now?
No.
That's like saying it's kind of going to kill you if you get stabbed in the heart. I mean,
I agree with that statement. But if we're buying and selling, I'm buying that. To be honest, like that was the final straw. Like tonight's game to me seems like it's been such a soap opera, and this is the series finale tonight. We've been on hiatus for a long time, and we didn't tie up any of the loose ends. So now, a year later, they've agreed, that we're going to air tonight the series finale in the great Luongo soap opera.
The show is stunk for the last couple of years, but it's appointment television, and everybody's gonna watch the series finale because they want to see how it wraps up.
It's like they brought Larry David back to write the final episode of Seinfeld.
Yeah, right? Exactly. David Kelly and Sorkin. Sorkin's probably involved in this as well. Here's the problem, though. It's going to be boring, and you know why it's going to be boring? Because Luongo and Ryan Miller, who are have to be the stars of the show, are too mentally tough and professional. Ryan Miller is not bothered in the least by all this that's going on. It will have no impact on how he plays. He's always been a mentally tough guy who can separate all that kind of stuff. And he's given the Canucks great goaltending, so the goaltending is not an issue anymore. So fans can't say, well, we'd be better off if we had Luongo. Well, they wouldn't be because Ryan Miller's there. and Luongo's a great guy. Like, he handled that. Looking back on it, he handled that probably as well as anybody could have handled the situation. So I think it's just going to be boring. I think they're going to play a game. He'll say a couple things afterward. That'll be the end of it.
I mean, we sat there, Kevin, in 2012 and saw Miller Luongo for Canada USA, right? And one of the greatest games ever played.
Right.
And it's just crazy how this whole thing is played out. Between those two guys have a really interesting. And although they're both professional, they're both also whacked. They're both wacky people. But the crazy thing is, I mean, Miller has his own thing, and he'll be completely professional. But at the same time, he's got his own OCD stuff in locker rooms that you'll see him do with all of his pucks and lined up in different ways. And then you've got Luongo with his secret identity on the internet forever there, and that was fun. And I mean, I think I was incredibly impressed by Luongo, how he handled the whole Vancouver Canucks situation. Just from the point at which everybody knew he wanted out, and then suddenly he was the reason they were winning again. After that, after he had asked for a trade, I think asking for a trade was the best thing he could have done for his career, because he actually, when you took the pressure off of him, he played much better than he did before, and he was suddenly a really good goalie. He always has been, but he was really good for Vancouver. And then when Schneider gets traded, that craziness that goes on there, yeah, he handled everything well. I mean, he really did. I agree.
Tortorella handled nothing well, and that's
right.
I mean,
Right.
He just showed how mean he could be. Like he's a smart guy. Tortorella's a smart guy. You're trying to tell me that he didn't know what was going to happen when he made that decision? Like, it's nice to come out and say, well, I owe it to the team to put my best option out there. But do you really believe that Luongo was not the best option? Playing in a high-profile game like that. And I don't know what he was thinking.
Yeah, he get another job, Kevin?
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to ask.
Do you think he'll even get another job?
I would say that I believe that everybody's afraid of him right now, that he's a powder keg. But, Mike Keenan was difficult too. And, he sort of reinvented himself, many times and came back in the league. So I would never say never, because, hey, the New York Rangers are still benefiting from Tortorella's coaching. And you look at Girardi, Stahl, McDonough, and some other players. Like Vigneault has come in there and made that a nice offensive team. They're playing good hockey right now. He got them to the Stanley Cup final last year. Well, they got to the Stanley Cup final because they had the good speed team going and Lundqvist and everything else. But I would argue that it was also the principles and the sort of the mental toughness that Tortorella instilled in that. I mean, we're kind of seeing a similar thing in Nashville, where
I was about to say that.
Laviolette comes in and puts in the sort of the new offensive system, but Shea Weber and Yossi and that defensive group and a lot of those guys, they were trained by Barry Trotz to play.
You can't get rid of those habits. I mean, those habits they have are habits now.
Right.
They're no longer just trying to play defense a certain way. That's part of them.
Yeah, I mean, if they won the cup this year, I would argue you should put Trotz's name on that cup.
Yeah, you really should. I agree. I mean, the Laviolette is able to play this run and gun thing with them because of that, because they have that in them. And it is kind of surprising to see them give up leads lately, because that was not their strong suit. But I agree, they're very parallel situations, those two.
Yeah, wouldn't you just love, like, it would be useless because he would. I'm sure just laugh at you. But I always felt like I wanted to sit down with John Tortorella because I've always enjoyed talking to him. One-on-one, he's fun to talk to.
Yeah.
But I just want to say to him, John, the ridiculousness about your situation is that you could be one of the most respected coaches in the game if you were just nice. Just how hard is it to be nice? Like you can't turn a 25-goal scorer into a 50-goal scorer. But all Tortorella has to do to be a highly respected coach is just to be nicer. I mean, really, just treat players better.
I know a certain segment of the fan base in Toronto had joked about Tortorella being the interim guy in Toronto and beating up the players on the Leaf roster into submission. And honestly, it's like, I mean, the thing is, yes, his negative points are big negatives, and I think only time will sort of erase them. But his positive points, he turned defensemen who struggled defensively into willing shot blockers. Well, guys like, I mean, Stahl is always been a good player, but I think he worked on him. He worked on McDonough. McDonough was more of an offensive guy. Now he's very much a two-way defenseman, and that's one of the problems that Toronto has. But the negatives outweigh the positives with him.
Yeah, and he had a real negative impact on Edler in Vancouver.
Yes.
Couldn't deal with his style, and but he is. I mean, he's an exceptional coach who makes teams better. He won a cup in Tampa Bay. There he had Jay Feaster. Like, everyone remembers the story, or maybe they don't, but Vinny LeCavier and Tortorella were locking horns, and it was a horrible situation, and it was causing problems on the team because Vinny was a pretty popular guy, and at that point he was a pretty important offensive kingpin. Mm-hmm. And eventually Feaster solved the problem by calling both people in and saying, John, I'm not trading Vinny LeCavier. He is going to be your guy. You're going to have to play him all the time. And he said to Vinny, I am not firing John Tortorella. So live with it, figure it out. And he forced them to sort of get along.
Good on Jay. That's what you kind of wish some more gyms would do that. That's gutsy because you have to stick by that because in this league it's so you can never say never, right? But
yeah, I'm actually kind of a pretty big Jay Feaster backer. Like he's not a traditional hockey guy. He didn't grow up playing the game and all that, but I think he's a good manager of people. And I talked to several of people within the Flames organization that said it was so enjoyable to be in that organization when Jay Feaster was there. And they believed that he was going to, it was hard. Like, Suter, even though he's been very successful, when he was running the show, it was hard to be a Flame, Yeah. I mean, it was not fun to come to the office every day. And there was, it was difficult. And Jay Feaster just has a rosier attitude. And, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't have been able to turn it around. Who knows? But, like people like having Jay Feaster as their boss.
Yeah, and I've heard lots of different issues with him, but none of them are personality-wise. Personality-wise, everyone, but there's so many job responsibilities to general manager in the NHL. And a big problem, there's great guys out there who make great trades, who can run scouting departments really well, but can't deal with people at all,
Right.
So I think he could deal with people really incredibly well, and some of the other stuff sometimes was questionable, and some of the trades were iffy, but at the end of the day, it all has to be balanced out.
Maybe he would be better suited to be a team president.
I think so. I agree because he's really good with the community too. I think that's the other thing. That's a team president thing, not a GM thing. So. Well,
and that's what he's doing now. He's working for the Lightning and community service, and he'd be good about it. But I mean, I think he's a real smart guy, and he won that cup in Tampa Bay, and he deserved to win that cup. He did a nice job. He got everybody on the same page. He made some pretty bold moves. So.
Yeah. No, it's I couldn't agree more, and you're right with towards it, and like Keenan, Tortorella has certain players who believe in him and think he's the greatest coach ever. That was the weird thing. There are certain players out there you can find that don't think he's mean, that think he's the best, and that think he's the. I mean, there's not a lot of them, but they do exist, and those guys are completely sold.
Let me tell you my favorite Keenan story. Mm-hmm. When he was coaching the Blackhawks, there was a bar. I used to know the name of it, but now I can't think of it. But anyway, the coaches like to go to it. The players like to go to it. And Chelios basically went into Keenan and say, "Look, here's the rule. If your guys are in there and we walk in, we'll leave. But if we're there and you guys come in, then you got to leave." And that was the rule. So he happened to be coming in with a group of players and Brett Hall. And Mike Keenan was already in there, and and had a few ginger ales, as Mickey Ribna likes to say. And he saw Brett Hall, and he walked up Mike Keenan to Brett Hall and said, "Brett, you couldn't play for me." And Brett, without hesitation, looked at him and said, "Wouldn't want to." And then Chelios said, "You know the rules. Get out of here." So.
And then Brent Ray from Hitchcock, mini Mike Keenan, there.
Yeah, and then ended up later with Keenan, obviously. So.
Right, exactly. Wow, that's good. That's interesting. Wow, well, great show, quick show. Josh, what do you have to say?
A couple things. First of all, Joe Thornton again out tonight versus St. Louis. Joe actually finally revealing that it's a shoulder injury that's nagging him. No timetable on when he will return. He was on the ice today, which is a good sign, but apparently he's still a little ways away from returning. In Edmonton, no official word yet, according to Bob McKenzie. He says not sure of exact title, but former Oil King GM Bob Green has been elevated to oversee the Edmonton Oilers players in Edmonton Oiler player development. So they're bringing on another guy, this time not a coach, but also Coach Horchek on TSN Radio moments ago. Some interesting comments saying what he needs the team to work on as a team, getting our game structure down, needs to be better on rush and D coverage. We need to be more disciplined with our changes and tracking and back pressure. We're going to keep pushing, and we're going to get better. We had a good practice today. Everyone has to make a commitment. We felt we asked players to do things last night, and we were better in terms of allowing shots against, chances against, and high-end chances. He also commented on Roman Polak's comment from last night, and he said that Roman wasn't wrong, and he's saying what good teams do.
What did Roland say? I mean, just Roman.
Roman Polak said, that players don't want to play defense because it's hard work, and that they're all these guys basically just want to play offense, which is echoing what J.S. Shiger said, that they all want to play pond hockey and not play two-way hockey, because two-way hockey is not fun. But if you want to win, you have to play two-way hockey. And I don't think that some of the players on the Leafs right now are interested in putting in the work. They're interested in collecting their paychecks and scoring goals.
And more on Horachek, guys. He says, I told Phil to just focus on being the hardest working guy, example to his teammates, getting better, and not worrying about the media. It's hard for players that aren't comfortable with the media. We're just going to worry about the team. The media likes to ask questions and push buttons.
I love pushing buttons. Personally, I'm a button pusher. I've got buttons all over the house, everywhere. They're just for fun.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot more quotes, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah. No, like I said, I mean, the first thing Phil Kessel said, so what was Horachek's message to you? Well, he just said to be myself, and good.
That'll help.
Or like the typical coach thing. Yep, he just wants
that'll really help, Phil. Thank you.
We're going to dedicate ourselves to winning now. I always love that too with a new coach. When a new coach comes in, we're going to dedicate ourselves to winning now, because the last guy was not so much into that.
Yeah. I'm interested to see what happens tomorrow night against the Blue Jackets. If you remember last year, the Jackets blew them out both games at home. So I'm interested to see exactly what happens tomorrow night.
And the Blue Jackets is just another example of how you can play really, really well and not climb in the standings. I mean, it's unbelievable. They are still, 8 points out, 6 points out, and they've
been 6 points out now.
Been playing out of their minds since November.
Ryan Johansson's on fire, 4 goals in 4 games.
I know, they beat Dallas. They're two really hot teams, and they just can't get it together.
How about that Kevin Connaughton kid?
Well, they'll be able to eclipse. They'll be able to eclipse one team pretty soon.
Yeah.
Kevin Connaughton pulled off of waivers. Jim Nill putting on waivers, not really giving him a shot.
I know, and it's worse and scores against Dallas too. I saw that.
He's got 6 goals, and 4 of those goals are in the last, I'd say, 2 weeks.
Yeah, no.
Welcome to Jackets Buzz here on Hockey.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today, guys. We'll be back again tomorrow. Same hockey time, same hockey channel. Tomorrow with Ty Anderson, we'll be talking a little bit of Phil Kessel, but not a lot of Phil Kessel. Just a little bit. There was going to be a little debate between Mike and Ty in the beginning. So, if you bring your reading material for that one. But we'll talk soon. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. Talk to you then.